Okay, so let's make a start. Is this too loud? Sounds very loud. A couple of announcements. First of all, let me repeat that there is nothing that I can do, there's nothing that Cheng, William, or Avinash can do about the waitlist. If you're on the waitlist, there is nothing we can do. I'm sorry. Getting a slot in the class is an automatic process, so as other students drop the class, the people at the top of the two waitlist, remember there's two, one for LNS, the LNS C20Y, and one for EPS 20, it's the same class. As people drop the class, if you're on the waitlist, you get slotted in. There's nothing that we can do about it. Okay, so I'm sorry about that, and please stop emailing me about it. The second thing is to reiterate the announcement that William made, or Cheng perhaps made, at the beginning of Thursday's class. So if you go on to bspace, we use bspace in this class for a very limited set of purposes. One is to give you your grades. You'll be very concerned about that later. But right now, we also use it for you to sign up for things. And right now, what you need to do is sign up for a GSI. So about 70 of you have still not signed up for a GSI. The way that this works is we have 3 GSIs. There are 300 of you, so each GSI is assigned 100 students. And that GSI will be responsible for all of your grading. That GSI also has office hours, so there are no sections. Okay, so there's no mandatory sections that you need to show up for. But your GSI has office hours, I think 2 one-hour slots per week. Looking, Cheng, is it 2 1-hour slots per week? Yeah, 2 1-hour slots per week. And so those are there for you to go and talk to your GSI to ask him questions about the material in the class, about the assignments, whatever it may be. So you want to choose a GSI whose office hours you can work for you. You're available for their office hours. Okay, so you can go and talk to them. So if you have not signed up for a GSI, please do so ASAP. We'll probably give you this week, and after that we will just assign you to a GSI. All right? Yeah. The question was, are we supposed to sign up for field trips on bspace? Too many systems. Yes, but that's not yet. So when we get closer to the field trips, we will, in the same way that you see the sections with the GSIs, we will set something up for the field trips, and you'll be able to go and select the field trip that works for you. Oh, interesting. Sorry, I think my computer. You would have thought that UC Berkeley could provide us all with Wi-Fi that works. To anybody out there listening. All right, there we go. Okay, any other logistical questions? Okay, so I'm sorry I missed Thursday's class. Of course, Thursday's class was the second half of the scenario earthquake, where we went through and talked about a very realistic scenario of what might happen in a major earthquake. At the beginning of that scenario, I asked you, can we destroy a modern Western city, a modern US city? And so you already know the answer to that. The answer to that is yes. And one great example of that, of course, is what happened in Hurricane Katrina. So having talked about a scenario event, I want to talk about a real event. And obviously, it's not an earthquake, but many of the failings of the infrastructure that occurred in Hurricane Katrina are similar to the failings of the infrastructure that we should expect and anticipate following a magnitude 7 earthquake on the Hayward Fault. So that's why we're going to talk about Katrina. And so as we go through this, I'm going to run you through what happened on a day-by-day basis. Wherever you see New Orleans, you should insert Berkeley or San Francisco. When you see photos of officials from the city or the state, in this case in Louisiana, and the president, that's President Bush at the time, you should think of Mayor Ed Lee and you should think of Obama. It's going to be the exact same photos of the politicians rushing to the rescue after the infrastructure has been destroyed in an earthquake. So we're going to obviously just talk about Katrina, but there's a very specific reason we're talking about this, and I want you to recognize and think about what this might look like in the aftermath of a magnitude 7 earthquake on the Hayward Fault, now that you know what that would look like having done the scenario. Okay? But before we jump into it, just a little bit about hurricanes. How many of you have lived in a state where there are hurricanes? Not many of you. California, of course, doesn't have hurricanes. So just a little bit of background on the hurricanes. I mean, one slide worth of background. So when we talk about Atlantic hurricanes, this is the hazard map. Not surprisingly, it's hazardous wherever the coast touches the Atlantic. Florida is often the place where there are stories about hurricanes. In fact, I can't tell you how many times since Hurricane Katrina that I've been giving this lecture, and New Orleans has actually been in a hurricane warning. That's happened, I think, at least 2, possibly 3 times since Hurricane Katrina occurred. That literally on the day that I was talking about Hurricane Katrina, there was another hurricane approaching New Orleans. Okay? So the hurricane issue is a very real issue, obviously. It's different to earthquakes in the sense that every year there's a near miss if there wasn't a hit. Okay? And so these are obviously the states that have to worry about hurricanes. This is for the Atlantic hurricanes, and this is the average number of named storms. Let's just talk about hurricanes. The average number of hurricanes per year is 6.5. The high was 15, and the low was 2. Every year, various agencies predict how many hurricanes they think there's going to be. There is variability from year to year, as you'll see in a few moments. And so this year, NOAA is predicting 3 to 6 hurricanes. So far, this is the season so far. So the season starts in the middle of the summer and runs through the fall. So I think there's an official date. I think it's July, but it's the middle of the summer through the fall. And so we are partway through the season. It's around about this time that they usually start to really kick in. And so we haven't really seen any major hurricane threats yet this year, but there have been 3. These are the tracks of the hurricanes and the named storms so far this year. Okay? But that obviously is just partway through the season. Here are the tracks for last season, the Atlantic hurricanes, to give you a sense. The color is the wind intensity. Okay, so blue is sort of nothing too serious. The serious hurricanes are when it turns orange and becomes more red. So there was sort of one event last year. Here's 2012, a couple of years ago, and here's an example. So I think this was one of the years when I was giving this lecture, and there was a hurricane warning out for New Orleans. You can see that this particular hurricane, New Orleans is difficult to see on this map, but it's located right there. You see a hurricane direct hit, and this obviously was not as serious as Katrina, and we'll talk about why the Katrina hurricane was so damaging in a few moments. So that's 2012, 2011. So again, New Orleans is right here, so no direct on New Orleans. 2010, New Orleans, but it's a weak. I think this is just a tropical storm, not a hurricane. 2009, okay, again, right across the peninsula that has New Orleans on it. 2008, okay, couple across here. 2007, 2006, 2005, this is the year of Katrina. It was a particularly heavy year, okay? But of course, what matters here is not specifically the number of hurricanes, it's exactly where they have landfall. Okay, and Hurricane Katrina it was a big hurricane, first of all, and it was a direct hit, and so that was why it was so serious. But in fact, it was a year that was a big year for hurricanes, and then the year before that, 2004, not as bad as 2005, but pretty serious. So to give you a sense, so this is every year there are several hurricanes. Every year at some point there's a storm that does some serious damage to some part of the East Coast. All right, so this is a recurring annual hazard. Okay, so that's what's the difference between hurricanes and earthquakes. Earthquakes are not, you don't typically have a damaging earthquake in the US every year. You do typically have a damaging hurricane in the US every year. Okay, so that's just sort of by way of background. So let's talk about what happened in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit. So this was the day, Sunday, August the 28th, the day before the hurricane hit. Okay, so here's a satellite image. So New Orleans is on this little bird's foot. This bird's foot here is the Mississippi Delta. New Orleans is right about here. I'll hold my pointer as still as possible. Okay, so that's where New Orleans is, and the hurricane was sort of essentially moving in a northward direction at this point. Now, before the hurricane struck, they were already predicting a serious hit to New Orleans. Okay, so here's New Orleans Lake. Okay, I always have to ask somebody to tell me how to pronounce this. Anybody from Louisiana? Pontchartrain? Are you from Louisiana? Whoever said that? Oh, your brother is. Okay, that's close enough. Pontchartrain. So Lake Pontchartrain. So New Orleans is between the Mississippi River. So the Mississippi River, we'll talk about this in more detail, comes through Louisiana and then comes out this bird's foot right here. And so New Orleans is between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. Is that right? Okay, I'm going to stick with my mispronunciation. So even at this point, this is the computer projection of the flooding. So they were expecting flooding even before the hurricane had hit. Okay, so they knew that this was going to be a bad storm. And so as a result, they issued an evacuation warning, and many people in the city left. I saw one number, the estimated total number of people left in the city was 100,000. The population at the time was a little bit less than 500,000. Okay, so 4 in 5 people evacuated the city. Obviously, the smart thing to do. Okay, but still, 1 in 5, 100,000 people remained in the city. Needless to say, 400,000 people leaving one afternoon is chaos. And as you can see, the highway here was completely blocked. The emergency response folks have sort of learned lessons over the years about this, and now when they have evacuations, they will often turn both sides of a highway to going in the same direction. That's what they'll actually do. You can imagine how complicated that can be, but that's what they'll do when they're trying to get a large number of people out of a particular place. So this is the day before the hurricane struck. Monday, the hurricane had struck. So you can see this is the center of the hurricane. As you probably know, you'll see some maps in a minute. The strongest winds and the heaviest rain are not in the center. There's the eye of the storm, which is calm. It's around the eye of the storm. So it's just before the storm hits, it's usually the strongest. Just before the eye of the storm is over the city, is usually the strongest part of the storm with most rain, and then immediately after the eye is passed again, it comes up again, but usually not as bad. So on the Monday, this is now reported flooding. Okay, and so you can see that this broad section here, the downtown area, is sort of in this region. You'll see some more maps in a moment. And the older districts wrap around this meander of the Mississippi River, and then downtown is sort of here. And so the flooding sort of started immediately. If I flip back, you can see that they sort of were predicting flooding in this particular part. And so, prediction wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad either at the same time. And so the flooding started. Of course, there was an immediate response to try and pull people out. At this point, so this is Tuesday's paper I'm showing you, right? But this is what was going on Monday. Okay, so that's why. And so at this point in the paper, they still didn't fully understand what was going on. So it was chaos, right? Very difficult to get information about exactly what was going on in the city. You'll see that it was much worse than they thought at this point in the moment. And so images of them starting to try and evacuate people. These are the people who were left behind. These are the people who were trapped in these houses that you can see are flooded up to sort of about, I don't know what that is, 5 feet, maybe 4 or 5 feet of water depth. Okay, then on Tuesday, during the day, more of the levees started to fail. So there's this chain of events where some of the levees start to fail, parts of the city flood, and there's this cascading chain of events where more and more flooding occurs. And you can now see that a huge portion of the city, so basically all of the region between the river and the lake here is populated. And you can now see that this is the downtown, this is the Superdome where a lot of people evacuated to. This is the downtown area. A huge portion of the city is now flooded. Of course, the hurricane has largely dissipated. I'm not sure if it was still a tropical storm or just a storm system. It was still dumping a fair amount of rain, but of course nothing compared to what happened to New Orleans at this point. But now you can see, these trees, of course, these are trees that were lining or are lining roads. Right? You can see these straight lines, these are roads. And so a huge section of the city is just flooded. This is the lake over on the left-hand side here. Okay, there's lots of really stunning pictures of the large sections of the city flooded with just rooftops sticking through. Obviously, the downtown area in the background, completely flooded district in the foreground. At this point, basically, people had got it, that they could see just how serious this event was. And so, all of the newspapers around the world at this point were running front cover stories about how this particular city was largely flooded. Okay, Wednesday, 2 days after the hurricane hit. So now they really are recognizing that everybody has to leave the city. There's a complete breakdown of city infrastructure, okay, due to the mass flooding. There's a complete breakdown of the water system, the power system, the transportation system. People can't get around the city. And so people were still trying to get out. But the reality was it was very difficult for anybody to get out because such a wide area was flooded, okay? And you probably remember, hopefully you remember the images of people at the Superdome where there were tens of thousands of people all at the Superdome waiting to be rescued. Day 3 is sort of when the true horror of what had happened really started to set in. I mean, this is a U.S. city, okay? And here's a body floating down. I'm not sure if this is a river or just an area that's flooded. Somebody obviously on an overpass and basically trying to survive, has some food, has some water. But the fact that you could see something like this in a modern city just shows you how there's been a complete breakdown of the infrastructure. Anarchy breaks out, beatings, lootings, gunfire surround terrified families waiting for help. This is on day 3. When people talk about being ready for disasters, they typically say you need to be ready to look after yourself for 3 days. They will tell you to have a 3-day supply of water, a 3-day supply of food. This is on day 3. Nobody was being rescued on day 3 after Hurricane Katrina. Okay? I was actually traveling at the time, so I guess I flew through I don't quite understand why I was flying through Scotland. But anyway, I picked up this Scottish newspaper, and even in Scotland, the Hurricane Katrina could just about compete with Beyoncé's knees. Beyoncé obviously made it to the top, above the fold, and Katrina was below the fold. But still, obviously this was an international story, the New York Post. Basically, they sent all of the security forces that they could send to try and restore order. I don't know how many people here actually remember this event, remember seeing the news from this event as a matter of interest. Okay, so most of you did good. So the previous day, all of the stories were about shootings and beatings and looting, and so on this day, day 3, the story was much more about restoring order in the city. Okay, 4 days after the event. So they're starting to be able to kind of get the rescue effort truly underway. It's still not fully underway. it's funny, I can show you, but if you look at the slides, the headline every day is Bush sends more troops. And it's the same headline for at least 3 days. So, centers were being set up. This is obviously in the airport, and where people were basically waiting for help to arrive. President Bush was widely criticized in this event because the criticism of him and his administration was that he didn't recognize rapidly enough how serious this event was. And it took him a number of days to really put all of the resources that he had at his disposal at the federal level into a rescue effort. However, on day 4, he did manage to get there personally. I think this is the governor, as I recall. So politicians show up, of course, to show sympathy. Saturday, so day 5, it was not until day 5 that they really got the rescue effort to be functional. And essentially, they just mobilized a mass number of helicopters, the National Guard, and they just started flying people out of the Superdome, 1 helicopter load at a time. Okay? And so it took that level of effort to actually get everybody out from the Superdome, the people who were still in the city. And again, that was because much of the city was flooded. You couldn't drive in, there weren't trains that you could use to get in, and so this was the only way of getting people out. Finally, on day 5, they got this underway, and that was really when the immediate rescue sort of started, and they got most of the people out on day 5. So people had to survive on their own for 5 days. Okay? An important number to remember when you're thinking about your own emergency preparedness. So then on day 6 is when they started to recover. They recovered the bodies, people who perished. About 1,500 people were killed in this hurricane. And so day 6, it wasn't until day 6, that's almost a week, that the story was no longer about helping people who were trapped and was now starting to think about recovery. Needless to say, it took a lot longer before the water disappeared. Okay, so that's the sequence of events that happened in Hurricane. Any questions or comments, thoughts about this? Yeah. Right. So the comment here was that, what's your name? Kristen was in a town about 45 miles north of New Orleans, recently or this year? 2 years ago. And the comment there was that Katrina was bad enough, but then there was another hurricane that came through just a few weeks later, Rita, which also did a huge amount of damage. So that's true. It was sort of a double whammy in that sense. Hurricane Rita didn't affect New Orleans as much as Katrina, so the path was slightly different. So some of the cities that sort of just missed, that Katrina just missed, were then hit by Rita a few weeks later. Right, so that made it even worse. Any other comments or questions? Yeah. So the comment, what's your name? Katie's saying, or asked the question, wasn't the end result of the hurricane beneficial to the city? Why would that be? So following the hurricane, there was a lot of economic development, building infrastructure, rebuilding the economy, and the infrastructure that was built was stronger as a result. So that is true, but I'm not sure I would phrase it quite how you did with your question, that it was an economic benefit. It's true that some of the lessons were learned from this hurricane, and when they were rebuilding the city, they did a better job. One would hope that they would have done a better job. So people always talk about this. There's always a big bump in the economic growth of a city after a disaster, so you can say that a good disaster is good for the economic health of a city, but that's what comes after this. Right? Any other comments or questions? Yeah. So the comment was, wasn't it some of the poorer parts of the city that were more heavily damaged by the event? And so some sort of association between the quality of the infrastructure and social economic level within society. It's true that it was some of the poorer areas of New Orleans that were most heavily damaged. And we'll come back to this, because I'm going to show you some maps of that in a minute. So let's talk about it in that context. Any other comments or questions? Yeah. So the comment was, weren't the houses that were hit, they weren't supposed to be there in the first place, and that they were built on marshlands. That is true. Almost all of New Orleans is below sea level. So right there should be a big warning, right? And it sort of comes back to the previous comment, I think, that some of the poorer neighborhoods were the neighborhoods that were furthest below sea level. We're going to see that with a map. Okay, so let's keep going. So having now given you the sort of blow-by-blow account of what happened for that week, I want to sort of back up and talk a little bit more about the geographic scenario that we're talking about here. Okay, so obviously the Mississippi River, a lot of the flooding came from the Mississippi River. And the source of New Orleans' difficulties is entirely our engineering of the Mississippi River. So I want to put that out there in front at the beginning, and we're going to talk about why that is for the rest of today. So the Mississippi, of course, it's a huge river system that drains much of the eastern United States. Let's see, one of the largest watersheds in the world, transports 400 million tons of sediment to the Louisiana wetlands per year. Okay, that's 200,000 dump trucks per day. 200,000 dump trucks of sediment per day. Huge volume of sediment. Okay, and so when you start doing things with a river, when you start engineering a river, you have to worry about how you may be changing the way that the river naturally interacts with its environment. Okay, 200,000 dump trucks of dirt per day. Okay, we're going to come back to that. So, of course, it's a big economic drive, the entire Mississippi River, $30 billion per year in petroleum products associated with the wetlands around in the watershed of the Mississippi River, $4.7 billion in natural gas, 400 million tons of waterborne commerce. The river, of course, is a major piece of the infrastructure that you use to move goods back and forth, and 4.4 billion per year in commercial and recreational fishing. Okay, so the river is a really big deal. It's used to facilitate business in the sense of transporting goods around. It's used for oil and gas. It's used for other natural resources, fishing specifically. Okay, the river really matters, and people know that the river really matters. However, at the same time, the river has all kinds of hazards associated with it, i.e. flooding. Okay, and this has always been a problem. River systems, the natural process of a river system includes